Hi, my name is Rachel Dove, and my presentation is Burger King Playing God, a study in genetically modified organisms and commercially available soy products. My research mentor was Dr. Whitney. So first of all, what are the benefits of genetically modified organisms? We've heard a lot about GMOs in the news, in the paper, everywhere. It's hard to turn around and not hear about GMOs. So why do we do it? Why do we genetically modify organisms? And first, we can increase crop yield. We can also change the nutrient content of these crops. In soybeans specifically, they have different types of oils in them, and we can select for which oil we want. So we can increase oleic acid or oleic oil while decreasing stearic oil, or vice versa, for whatever we need. So we can change the nutrient content. We can make food healthier this way. We can increase durability. We can make organisms that stand up better with less rain or in more extreme climates. Just can survive a harsher winter, things like that, to help increase yield as well, but it gives them greater durability. They can also self-produce pesticides. So this is done through, this is one example. There's a bacteria called Bacillus thuringiensis, and it releases a toxin that is fatal to this insect and its family, but this is the European corn borer. And so researchers found that toxin and they said, all right, what if we could put this into plants? So what they did is they took the Cry5-BT toxin gene out of the Bacillus thuringiensis and they inserted it into the genome of the crop. What this did is now the plant is producing the same toxin that Bacillus thuringiensis produced. So when the European corn borer comes to eat the plant, it dies. It creates its own, it ingest the toxin created by the plant, not by the bacteria, but by the plant, and it dies. So in this way, we're creating our own pesticides. There's a lot of concern about spraying pesticides and insecticides on crops. There's potential ecological concerns, what's the impact on human health, that sort of thing. So we can have crops that are producing their own pesticides naturally so that we're not facing those problems by spraying them on. And the BT gene and the toxin it creates is completely harmless to animals, to humans, to anything but the European corn borer and the close relatives of it. Other benefits of genetically modified organisms: a longer shelf life. We can make products that last longer, and we can make crops healthier as well. Fruit can be bigger, shinier, better, taste better, but also can be made healthier. Changing the nutrient content can be used to help create healthier foods. So what are some of the risks? There's a religious concern, and a big one, across all religious groups, not just from a Christian perspective, but the Christian perspective is modifying creation like playing God. God is a creator, and he has created each and every plant and animal in his design. What does it mean when we try to change it? Do we think that we can do it better than God? What are we trying to do in that sense is a big concern for a lot of religious communities. There's also ecological concerns. Gene transfer is a big one. You can genetically modify an organism, you can plant that crop, but there's always a risk of cross-contamination or cross-pollination to other species. And that has unintended consequences, such as the reduction of biodiversity. That's a huge risk when we take natural selection into our own hands. Not only are we reducing the need for mutations and natural selection and the constant improvement of species, we're also potentially harming levels of the food chain. So if we do the Roundup Ready, the BT modification, then that might take out the European corn borers. Well, if we take out the European corn borers from the ecosystem because we removed their food, because they all died because of the BT toxin gene, then we might be affecting the level up, what eats the European corn borers, and the level above that. And at the end of the day, we might have a large change in biodiversity because we've taken out something at the source. So that's a huge concern. There's also the risk of being harmful to small farmers. A lot of times these are big companies that are creating genetically modified organisms. And when they create them, they add a terminator gene in there. And what this does is it means that the seeds that are planted are only good for the planting season. They can't be reused. So farmers have to keep going back every year and rebuying these seeds at whatever cost the company sets. They can't save them, they can't reuse them, And that's harmful to small farmers. They're at the mercy of these larger companies that just have profit in mind. That can be a really harmful thing for smaller farmers. So the non-GMO project, you've probably seen this label on food sources everywhere. What this is it is a company or project, I guess, that has a long list of what makes something non-GMO verified. And this is if it's a plant or if it's an animal product, what feed did the animals use? If it's a plant, was their genetic modification here within the same factory as something that, like, it is an extensive list of qualifications to get this certification. The non-GMO project believes that we don't know enough about genetically modified organisms to understand their impact on the world and on human health. And consumers deserve to know what they're eating. So they give this label to verify that something is non-GMO from its source to wherever you're buying it. So what my research was is kind of based upon some of the tests that the non-GMO project would do to ensure that something does or does not have genetic modifications. So my research objective was to test for the presence of genetic modifications of commercially available products through polymerase chain reaction genetic analysis. So these are the products I tested. I started with the idea of testing soy products. So I wanted to test soy products because soy is one of the only genetically modified organisms that is approved for human consumption, not just animal feeds or oils and foods, but soy can be modified and eaten. So on the bottom row here are all soy products, 2 types of edamame, one of which has a non-GMO label, but not the non-GMO project label. It's like an independent label. Tofu, which is soy, and then also Impossible burgers. I got an Impossible Whopper from Burger King to test. It's become much more popular in the past few years to have plant-based proteins to help reduce our environmental impact. It's pretty well known that animals release a lot of methane, cows release methane. So if we can start eating plant-based proteins, we can reduce our animal consumption. We can help reduce greenhouse gases that are produced through that, as well as improving other ecological concerns. So after I tested the soy products, I wanted to test some of these beyond these plant-based proteins. So I got a Beyond Burger, I kept the Impossible Whopper, and then I got this Light Life Smart Sausage. It's vegetarian sausage. What's really cool about these is they're all made from plants, but they're made to taste and mimic the feel of meat. And the way that Impossible has done it is they've taken a protein from the roots of soy, and they have modified yeast to create this protein. And this creates a heme flavor. It's like the blood flavor that we like in meat. And so that's how Impossible Burgers, Impossible Whoppers, that's how they mimic the flavor of meat, is through genetic modification of yeast. Beyond does it a little bit differently. They take plants and they don't modify them, but they put them through an intense like cooking pressurization process to give it a meat flavor and texture. So the way that I did this was I would grind up each sample in a mortar and pestle, boil it down, centrifuge it, and then I would put it through PCR. All of this was done to extract the DNA from the sample, and in the PCR machine, I put in primers that would look for a specific sequence and cut there. And so I could put in my little bit of DNA that I'd extracted, and the PCR machine would cut it and replicate it so that I could use it for future analysis. So my experimental design, 3 trials were completed with the Impossible Whopper, Simple Truth Organic Tofu, Private Selection Edamame, Picked Sweet Farms Edamame, and a positive and negative control. All of these, with the exception of the positive and negative control, which were an oat and a corn product, were all soy-based. So they all stood a risk of being genetically modified in some form or fashion. The positive and negative control, we knew they were both plants, but one of them had been genetically modified and the other was certified that it had not. Then after I completed those 3 trials, I completed 1 trial with the Impossible Whopper, Beyond Burger, and the Light Life Smart Sausage, and a negative control. And these are all plant-based protein sources. So here's my results from the first trial. So here is a ruler. So when I would load DNA into each one of these wells that I'd gotten out of the PCR machine. And the way it works is DNA travels down the gel based on its size. So smaller pieces move faster down. So that's how there's 100 base pair pieces here and 1,000 base pair pieces here. So we bought the ruler, we know these sizes for sure, and then we can measure everything else based on that. So this is the positive control down here. I think my face is hiding it, but it's positive control. This is the plant band. If there is a band found here, we know for a fact that plant proteins were used and that there's plant material in there. So as you can see, the negative control has a plant band. Both edamames, the Impossible Whopper, the tofu, they all show plant material, which is good. It's what we assumed. This here is the GMO band. Positive control is positive for genetic modification. So we could then look across and see if there was genetic modification across the board. The only place that showed genetic modification was in the Impossible Whopper. The Impossible Whopper had a very faint but very present GMO band, showing that it was genetically modified. So then in trial 4, once again, we have our ruler. This gel was a little different. It was the same material, but it traveled a little bit differently, like different size. So that's why the pictures look so different. Here's our negative control. So once again, we can see they're all plant materials, but there's no GMO bands anywhere except for here in the Impossible Whopper category. So this shows the Light Life Smart Sausage and the Beyond Burger are both non-GMO. So why is this important? Only one sample in the 4th trial showed genetic modification, only one sample in the 1st trial, and it was the Impossible Whopper. This is important. It's consistent with published ingredients of the Impossible brand. The Impossible brand is proud to use GMOs. They believe that through genetic modification, we can better our food sources and better our environment and our world. If genetic modification leads to an easier way to get these plant-based proteins, we can start swapping out meat. We can help save our environment. And they're very proud to use that. 2 samples were publicized as certified non-GMO. It's Beyond Burger and Smart Life Sausage. Both of those showed no evidence of genetic modification. That's important because that's what they said that they were. Unfortunately, just saying that you're non-GMO doesn't always mean that you are. There's always a risk of gene transfer across pollination. So it's important to continue testing and retesting in order to get and keep that non-GMO project verification label. There's a testing and retesting process similar to this to show that at no point in that product's life has it been genetically modified or come in contact with a genetically modified organism that would affect it. And the Pig Sweet Farms edamame, the Simple Truth organic tofu, and the Private Selection edamame also showed no evidence of genetic modification in their trial as well, which was all what they had published, but none of them had the non-GMO project verified label. So why is this important? What's the big idea here? First and foremost, this research, I would consider it to be a success because I did get results. I got results consistent with what each brand published and what they said, which is good for them, and also good for me to show that it is important to test and retest these materials. If I were to continue working on this research, I would perhaps pick a different organism to test, something else that is approved for human consumption like corn. Or I would look more in depth on what we found in the Impossible Whopper. So we know that we found genetic modification, but what was modified? What was changed there? Another conclusion I came to is the importance of labeling. It is incredibly important that consumers know what they're buying and what they're eating. The Non-GMO Project has done a great job of creating a very strict label of, yes, this is labeled, we've certified it, this is great. I think the same should be done for products that are genetically modified. Consumers deserve to know what they are buying. And if they aren't comfortable with genetic modification for whatever reason, they deserve to know before they purchase. So I guess this all begs the question, is Burger King playing God? They use Impossible Whoppers and Impossible Burgers that is proud to use genetic modification. So I guess it's up to the consumer at the end of the day if that genetic modification has meant that the king is trying to play God. Thank you.